Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to today's community webcast. Today, Managing CA Single Sign-On with CoreBlox ToolBox. And you always have trouble with that. We have Mehlhorn from the product management team here at CA, and Todd Clayton and Ben Stroud from the CoreBlox team are going to be presenting. Just a couple housekeeping items. We'll be taking questions at the session. You can ask a question by putting in the Q&A tab at any time. Just be sure to ask it of everyone so we're sure we see it. And additionally, the session will be recorded and the presentation will be posted with the recording up to the community site after, well, the next couple days. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Herb.
Thank you very much, Chris, and appreciate people taking time out of their day today to listen and participate in this. I did want to indicate a couple of additional things. Todd and Ben are from an organization known as CoreBlox. CoreBlox is a partner of CA's at a technology level and at a services level. What we're going to specifically cover in this conversation, in this material, is a capability that the CoreBlox organization has built that leverages part of the REST interface that CA SSO has developed and provided to the marketplace. One other comment related to CoreBlox is, as a partner of ours, they have developed and have had over an extended period of time a very deep set of expertise in relationship to CA SSO, again, both from a technology standpoint and a services standpoint. So, I'm very happy to be able to have this opportunity to do this webinar in combination with Todd and Ben. And let me start by taking you forward through some of the material and what we intend to cover. I think there is, and again, sort of add a little bit of comment on this, Chris. There is the Q&A tab where if questions come up during the course of the webinar, you can enter that question, and the team will try to take a look at those as we run towards the end and answer as many of the questions as might come up. So I hope that helps as well. The agenda for today will follow this pattern. We're going to talk a little bit about the fit and the placement of CA SSO within this concept of the modern software factory. A little bit of a summary of this capability that's been added to the SSO product. Started with 12.7. The 12.8 release is now available, but the foundation for what you're going to see really was created in the 12.7 release. I know we have a large proportion of our customer base today that is contemplating their next upgrade and their next move, and I think the combination of the information that you'll hear today will be very beneficial as you think about some of those things. And then I'll turn the conversation over to Todd, who will take us through aspects of the policy management framework, the toolbox offering, and a demonstration as well that's going to be executed here. And then again, we'll come back to questions. So that's what we have laid out for you for the next 50 minutes. And again, thank you for joining. I see some additional people coming into the call as we're going on, and appreciate your attention. So starting at the high level, the CA strategy in aggregate is related to this concept that today every business is in the software business. Every organization is trying to create a tighter and closer connection to their constituents, their customers, and they're doing that primarily, not solely, but primarily through software that is the way in which they're trying to create a closer connection to understand what the customer need is or the constituent need is, translate that into an ability to deliver a service to the customer, and have that as a mechanism for creating greater value delivered to the customer from the organization. And as a result of that, certainly the experience that the customer of your organization has is really important. Enabling a simpler and closer connection, making that easy for your customers or your constituents to achieve. So in that aspect of you being a software business to your constituents, experience is everything. And in order to both win customers and as importantly, maintain and expand that relationship with your existing customers. You know, the digital experience is key to doing that. Within CA, as we look at that proposition and understand what capabilities we can offer to you as customers in order to accomplish that improved digital experience, we've synthesized our understanding down to 4 key principles: agility, automation, insights, and security. And the way we view it is in this sort of represented in this picture with the additional description. The key element here is that agility is about the ability for an organization to change and adapt to information they're learning. Sometimes people think of agility as speed. There is an element of speed associated with it, but agility is really about the ability to change direction and do that, obviously, based on good information, but agility is a key piece. Automation is really the element of where you can achieve increased velocity, and automation will help with a whole range of elements related to translating a concept into an idea and a product that relates to offering software, getting closer connection to your customers. So automation is a key element of this. Insights really are the aspect of how you take information out of that connection that you're creating with your customer, out of that product you're offering, to better understand what their needs are and how you can accelerate and improve the value you're delivering. And then fundamentally, security obviously is how you make sure that the right set of information is shared with the right people or the right system at the right time, and that it's done in a way that gives you confidence and doesn't create problems for you, your chief security officer, your CIO, and your shareholders or your constituents just in general. So this is our overall CA strategy with respect to how we help support organizations as they evolve to become their own modern software factory. And when we think about CA Single Sign-On, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, okay, that fits into the security aspect of what organizations are trying to achieve with respect to this modern software factory. It's in essence a access management tool. It provides secure capabilities for trying to ensure the right people get access to the right information at the right time, and do so in a way that has the level of trust necessary to be successful. But fundamentally, the need for agility also starts to come into play as people start thinking about how do I more quickly and easily adjust the path and the direction that I want to take my software as I'm building it and get it to customers in a way that is, again, highly beneficial in terms of delivering additional value. And so fundamentally, as people start thinking about the modern software factory, they start thinking about these sorts of things. How do I do continuous integration and delivery? And typically that would be done and executed in a way that allows architectures that are more loosely coupled, i.e. in today's development space that really relates to and is primarily being advanced through REST as a mechanism for helping accomplish that. How do I deliver faster incremental capabilities to my customer base? And then finally, again, from this concept of automation, how do I do so in a way that's faster and easier to achieve? So fundamentally, one of the additional things we have to think about in relationship to CA SSO is how do we continue to enable other aspects of the modern software factory to be achieved as our customers, the people here that are on the phone, are trying to end up becoming a modern software factory where they deliver apps and upgrade those apps and change those apps for the benefit of their customers. How do we enable that to be achieved with CA SSO being part of the picture? So in this, again, sort of the simple picture is, yeah, CA SSO fits in and it's primarily a security-based offering. But as you become more agile and as you try to create more ability to deliver your software interaction with your customers, we need to help you achieve that, such that CA SSO can continue to provide its role in that security quadrant of this circle. And that's where our partners here, CoreBlox, are providing some additional capabilities to help organizations move in that direction more effectively. So what did we do in CA SSO to help create this foundation? We started with the 12.7 release and introduced a REST service on top of CA SSO, which enables a more streamlined way, a more complete way for making changes to the policies that are enforced by CA SSO. So again, you go back to that last picture and you think, okay, CA SSO is falling into the security space, but in order for me to be successful in my use of CA SSO in this modern software factory, I need to be able to be agile and make changes to policies and policy objects, specifically within the CA SSO offering. And so with 12.7, we introduced a REST interface for creating, updating, or deleting objects in the policy store. And objects are simply the technical components for the SSO product to provide authentication authorization services to resources it protects. So again, the title of this slide is A New App to Protect, and the REST interface is useful and valuable in helping you achieve that end result. The extent of the REST interface is to include not only initialization of new policies, but also changing existing policies. The solution comes with a set of Swagger documentation and helpful descriptions on how to achieve that end result. And it applies to the objects within the policy store. We showed objects related to creating new policies, but federated partnerships also fall into that category. And then additionally, and this is really also critical to how CoreBlox has used this springboard to provide a capability within ToolBox which ranges across a whole set of use cases that they'll describe for you. But also the interface is there to help support the concept of upgrades and migrations. So the evolution of CA SSO has incorporated these capabilities to start giving greater flexibility to your organization and additionally to our partners to help you achieve the end results you're targeting. So with that, I'd like to turn the slide material over to Todd to take us forward with additional description, and then obviously with Ben to help provide some of the demonstrations. So Todd, I will now make you the presenter, and you should be able to advance the slides.
Yes. So great. Thank you very much, Herb, and good day, everyone. As Herb mentioned, we are a partner of CA and have been since 2005. So we've built up kind of a large knowledge base of information during that time, and the basis for what I'm going to run through really is a set of observations that we've put together over the time that we've been doing these implementations. Specifically, what I'm going to cover are things like the processes around policy management, some considerations when upgrading your environment, and then also overall management of your environment itself. So when we talk about policy standards, one of the places to start, which seems basic, but we have seen pretty much not used in many locations, is just a simple naming standard for your objects. And this should cover all of your objects, from agent names to applications to even host configs, anything within the policy store that you're configuring. And what we've done typically is use an application name and a dash and then the type of object it is. You can come up with your own standard for that. But in essence, by creating that type of a naming standard, it makes sure that your policies are easily identifiable. And that's important when you look to make changes and upgrades or updates to applications. New policies need to be added. You're looking through your policy store, trying to figure out things configured. Those naming standards are a critical piece to your policy definition process. Another piece to keep in mind, and a way to do this, is to have what I'd like to call an application template. And really, this is just a basis or a way to create the base policies that are used whenever you're generating new policies for your applications. And this kind of defined template then can be used when you're onboarding applications and defining the procedures that you use for those applications. Things like the questions to ask, the teams to get involved, the type of application it is, all of those things can then be married to that application template, which gives then the business quick and secure policies deployed for their application. Another thing which seems basic, which we've seen not used in many locations, is just simple documentation around the policies that have been deployed, the applications that have been integrated. There's too many cases where you go to do an upgrade or you need to make changes to your environment, and it's a guessing game for how these policies have been configured in the past. So make sure as you go through and incorporate these new applications that your standards include a process for documenting your environment. And one piece that also comes into play are things like governance standards, and that could be the way you manage your users. There are new standards for governance now coming out recently. It could be things like way that information has to be logged, or even how you go through the promotion process. But really what it comes down to is consistency, and consistency is really key to this environment. So making sure that those processes are well defined, understanding the teams that need to be involved, understanding your communication procedures. How do the applications know how to engage you? When you need to make upgrades, how do you know how to modify or notify these teams that are leveraging your infrastructure? And what are the ways that you learn about upgrades to the environment through things like enhancements or updates? You know, too many times we've also seen policies that are created by hand as you move through your environment. And the trouble with that is that errors can be introduced along the way. So using the capabilities that Herb was talking about, you need a way to automate the processes and the deployment procedures and the upgrades that you go through as you leverage the new enhancements or the new versions, or you need to deploy applications to production. And this becomes especially true when you have multiple teams involved in the process. When you have one team that's doing the creation of the policies and another team that's actually doing the deployment of those policies to production. So some things to consider when you're doing an upgrade in your CA SSO environment are really, initially to have a strategy. You need to make sure you have not only those details on the applications, but also details on every component in your environment. What are the versions that are out there? What are the agents? What agents are talking to which policy servers? On the server side, things like which authentication schemes are being used and what custom code do you have. Do those things need to be updated, or are there other pieces that have to happen as part of that upgrade process? And then correlate that to a detailed plan. How are you going to go through and upgrade these components as they're deployed? Are you going to do this as a side-by-side deployment? which is really the optimal approach? And if so, what is the way that you're going to be migrating or moving applications over to this new upgraded version of CA SSO? The other piece that you need to make sure, and one thing that side-by-side upgrades also give you, are not only an easier deployment plan, but also an easier rollback plan. So if you do run into challenges, it's a matter of just switching the applications back to the older version and learning what went wrong and then deploying them again the second time. The other benefit of a side-by-side upgrade is that it lets you clean up as you go along. So as your policy stores have been in existence for a while, they've accumulated things which may no longer be out there and deployed, applications which perhaps are no longer in use. And as you upgrade, that gives you the opportunity to go through and make sure that the policies that are there are really the policies that currently need to be there. And using that side-by-side approach, you can say, well, we'll just deploy this set, or even deploy them as applications are moved over, instead of trying to migrate the entire policy store. Make sure as you go that you have good backups, so things like XPS exports, or what you'll see later in our tool are things like versioning. And make sure you have not only a backup at the beginning, but also then a backup of your kind of final standard version, your final deployment. And automation is really that key. How do you take what sounds like a complicated process and make it simpler? When you want to migrate over applications, how can you do that in a fashion that makes it easy to move over those single configurations and clean up your policy store as you go? And as Herb mentioned, these new REST-based APIs are the right approach to do that. That ensures consistency as you go. It lets you actually access and get to all of the objects that you need to, and it eliminates the need to do this kind of bulk approach to moving information back and forth as you upgrade. And really, it's the only way to handle some of the things that you need to do as you do your upgrade to make sure that you stay on top of all the changes that are going on. So what does it mean to kind of turbocharge your CA SSO environment? I'm sure you all have run into the situation where businesses really expect everything to be done at the speed of light. There's no time, there's no patience for what it takes to go through the creation of a policy. They need their applications to be implemented and integrated in a very quick fashion. And then you also are impacted by limitations for things like maintenance windows, the work that you need to do because you're spending so much time on helping businesses being able to provide things like upgrades or updates, which may have security implications or even worse, limit your ability to deliver the enhanced functionality that could make the business applications even better. How do you onboard new applications? How do you version what's going on in your environment? How do you roll back things if they're needed? And how do you take these new environments, these new policies, and move them from environment to environment, all doing this in a way that maintains a backward-compatible approach without impacting the existing applications that have already been deployed? That movement, that deployment of policies from dev to QA or QA to prod or 12.7 to 12.8, any of these changes can be basically automated through the REST API features. And like I mentioned before, this becomes even more complicated as things are deployed where different teams are involved in the process. Another thing you need to be able to do is keep tabs on what are the differences between the environments. Things like a user directory may talk to different backends as you go from environment to environment. And historically, how people have done this is go out move over the policies. Hopefully you didn't have to create those by hand, and even after you've created those policies, now you have to go back in and make changes to do the adaptions or do the things that are needed for it to run in the new environment. So how can you make these changes as you actually roll out your applications in a way that is a repeatable process, and you don't have to do this manually every single time you deploy new applications? Understanding those differences also helps you track down errors that can creep in, especially when these things have historically been created manually. If your policy lets a different set of users in to access an application because it's been hand-entered and a mistake came in, that could pose a security challenge, and you really need to make sure that you understand those differences that exist. This can be all implemented and optimized through the new REST APIs. All of these capabilities are there for you to take a look at what's in your environments, to optimize what's in your environments, to look at what's been configured and figure out how to make it better, and to move these policies around as you go from QA to dev, or dev to QA, or QA to prod, or however you need to manage those, or especially when you're doing things like upgrading and cleaning up things as you do your side-by-side upgrade. So little basis or little background on the toolbox itself. It is a companion product for CA SSO, and really I wanted to show you how you can even take the REST APIs and build a tool around CA SSO to do the automation. Obviously we've done the work for you here, but all of the things that we're doing and all of the things we're showing are all leveraging the capabilities inherent to the REST-based APIs. I'm going to walk you through some of the basis or some of the things that we've done, and we've really built this tool around the things that we've seen as we've gone to deploy CA SSO in the many environments that we've done implementations. As I mentioned, this is all built on the standard REST APIs, so we're not doing anything custom here. Everything that you see, these are leveraging the APIs that are available, and it really gets to that state, allows you to get to that state where we talk about that turbocharged environment for really being able to take what you've defined, take what you've built, and move it from tier to tier and from version to version. And with that consistency that you need to leverage those standards that you've defined and make sure that those standards flow easily across your environments or across versions. So how do you get to that increased ROI? Everyone spends a lot of time just maintaining their environment. How can you get some optimization in what you're looking to do? Think about how much time you spend just in the day-to-day operations doing administration tasks. What are the basics? What are the ways that you can look at that and find ways to save time and save money? And that kind of core thing that you have to do that is that management aspect, when you're spending more time doing that and less time working with the business owners, has a real impact on what you can do and the time that you need to have available to deploy new applications into your environment. So the items we identified for our initial release are really the ways that you can simplify the management of your environment, and then during that migration or upgrade process, ways that you can, in essence, simplify what you've deployed. So being able to do things like during your migration, take a version, a snapshot of what's in your environment, or even snapshot the environment as a whole, migrate specific objects, transform those objects as they're migrated so that you're not hand-entering information after you've moved your policies from one tier or one version to another. We also wanted to make it easy for you to clone your environments. You're setting up a new QA environment. How can you move over the pieces you need to and just clone what you have so you're not having to do this either directly on the servers or on a kind of a policy-by-policy basis. During engagements, we also wanted a standard approach for reviewing the policies in their environment. These policies have been defined over long periods of time. There's best practices that can be implemented when defining policies, but how do you take a look easily at what's there and get recommendations on things that you can improve? Maybe your balance of rules to realms is off, or maybe the cache settings are low. Different things which would require looking at many objects. Maybe there's a way instead to get a kind of a central view of ways that you can optimize your environment. And we needed to deal with things like the separation of duties. How do you define your policies and give them over to another team to deploy them to production without writing that book of deployment procedures, and giving them access perhaps at the system level where you really just want them to have access to the application itself? Well, what can you do instead to define those groups, to identify these users, and then give them access to just make the changes that you've decided to allow them to make, and deploy those pieces to production? So what does ToolBox deliver? It really has an automation interface for the migration and cloning of policies. That's really the basis of the management simplification that I've been talking about. As I said, it covers all the objects, so one of the real advantages of the REST APIs is everything in the policy store we can access. So there's pieces that need to be moved over. You're not talking about having any limitations in what can be deployed. Those REST APIs are really the core of that, and as you're going, either during the migration or on a manual basis, we gave you the ability to snapshot your environment. So that way you have that gold standard, you have that version that has everything you need to roll back to if some error or mistake creeps into your environment. We also gave you the ability to generate reports that allow you to optimize your environment. Takes a look at all those objects, takes a look at the best practices that we have found over the 13 years we've been doing this, and gives you an easy way to get access to that information based on the policies that you have in your environment. Some of the administrative pieces, ways to define environments, and also the ways to define those role-based access controls are also core to the system. So just to set up what you're going to see in the demo next, you've got two main screens. First we're going to walk you through how we leverage the REST APIs to deliver tools around the functions that I've been discussing. So that migrate function, the snapshot, clone, optimize, all of these functions were developed and defined based upon what we've seen, and then also based upon that capability that we're very excited about with those REST APIs in the product. Second piece, we're just going to quickly show you how the administration environment works, how you do some of the delegated administration tasks, and how this interface is similar to what you've seen in other CA interfaces to make this easy to understand. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben for the demo, and he's going to actually be able to show you the tool and give you a good example of what I've been talking about.
All right, thanks, Todd. Let's get my share going here. Right. All right, so today I'm going to show you some of the features of the all-new CoreBlox ToolBox for CA Single SignOn. As Todd was saying, the ToolBox utilizes CA SSO's built-in APIs to help you simplify and manage complex SSO architectures with multiple tiers and multiple SSO deployments from a single user-friendly interface. The Toolbox is a single web application. It's running on your private infrastructure, so it's not, software as a service. And it contains a set of individual tools: the migration tool, the snapshot tool, the optimization tool, and the cloning tool. The Toolbox is really easy to deploy. For SSO version 12.7 and above, all you need to do is unzip the install package to a server with network access to your SSO environment, and then launch a couple of Toolbox services that are self-contained. And it's pretty simple. Once you've done that, all the configuration and everything is done from within the UI you see in front of you. So today I'm going to log in as a super user that you get by default once you do the install. I'll have full privileges for this part of the demo, and later on we'll see what happens when I log in as a lower level user. So here we see the launchpad as new tools are added to the Toolbox. In later releases, they'll show up here. Right now, as we said, you see the migration tool, the snapshot tool, the optimization tool, and the clone tool. At any time, we can also access the administrative pages by clicking the admin button to the left. But for now, we're just going to take a closer look at the migration tool. First, we see a list of saved migrations. There's just a couple here. As users create and save migrations, they'll show up here for any users that have permission to view those migrations. These migrations can be opened and reused with different settings, or could just be used for record-keeping purposes. All the migrations you see and all the other assets created by the Toolbox are stored in a central database that comes bundled and embedded with the Toolbox. It's not a separate install that you have to maintain. But for this demo, rather than reuse a saved migration, we're going to walk through creating a new migration. So you just hit create, and we'll start by giving it a name. Demo migration. We'll pick a source and destination environment. The source environment is where you want to pull all your SSO objects from, and the destination is, of course, where you want those objects to end up after the migration completes. The scenario that we're going to use for this demo is that we're trying to maintain a 3-tier dev, QA, and prod architecture. And in this migration, we'll move some objects we've been testing from our dev environment into our QA environment. So we pick dev environment as the source and QA as the destination. The environments in these two drop-downs were configured earlier in the Toolbox UI, and we'll go over how that's done later in the demo and how you attach it to any particular group or user. Once we picked our source and destination environments, we can configure some of the transformations that will happen to the objects before they are sent to the destination environment. For example, say I have a different naming scheme like Todd was talking about between my dev and QA environments. All my dev environments, dev objects include the word dev in them, but my QA environment all include QA. So the migration tool can help you make these kind of simple automated transformations by allowing the user to find and replace as many strings in object name as in the object names as is required to preserve any such naming scheme. The tool also allows for prepending and appending specific strings to all the object names that are included in the migration. So in this case, I want to replace portal with site for all my object names, and for the URLs, say I want to replace dev with QAs. So all my URLs for my dev environment say dev.myportal.com, and I want to replace that with with QA.myportal.com. So the migration tool will allow you to choose from a set of 6 common high-level objects to move over. During the migration process, all the lower-level objects that make up those higher-level objects are also moved over. The migration tool ensures that there are no orphaned objects or any unsatisfied object references once the migration is complete. So we try to keep it simple in the UI. You're picking high-level objects, and then everything that's needed to support those high-level objects gets moved over automatically. So in this case, I'm going to be moving over one of the Federation partnerships that I've set up in the dev environment. And we're also going to move over an ACO, an agent config object. Pick a couple objects here. So let's take a closer look at the agent config and kind of zoom in on the object here and see the toolbox allows you to make changes to some common fields within each object. In this case, it's the ACO's attributes. It'll change based on each object's what's important in each object. We won't make any manual changes for this demo, but there are some URL values that are going to be updated by the transformation engine before that object is sent to the target environment. Before we run the migration, we can actually save it for later. So let's go ahead and do that pretty quick. Now let's go ahead and run it. So, you know, there's a certain number of things happening here, and you know, we're taking each of the high-level objects and analyzing, you know, all the supporting objects, sorting those supporting objects in the right order, and then making sure all the required objects are there in the target environment and any transformations take place. So once that's done, you'll see a little complete with a status that'll list some of the larger support objects and, of course, the main high-level objects. So let's take a look at the admin UI for those, the source and destination environment. Log in here. We'll do a quick comparison. So we'll take a look at that object that we moved over. Give it a second to load. All right. So you can see, comparing the two Fed objects, they're exactly the same. We moved over from the source environment into the target environment, and that Fed object is set up exactly like it was on the source environment. So now my test dev Fed object is on my QA environment and it's ready for testing. If you decide you don't want these objects in your target environment after all, and you want an easy way to kind of put everything back the way it was, that's where the snapshots come into play. Before any migration logic happened, a snapshot of the target environment was automatically created. And let's take a look at that now. So we'll go back to the tools, snapshot, and we can see that snapshot was just taken. As I said before, a snapshot is a record of the state of a policy store at any given point in time, which you can use to roll back any changes to that policy store since the snapshot was taken. You know, we saw a list of everything that the user has access to, and now you can see this one particular snapshot and everything that was in it. So all you have to do to roll it back is just hit rollback. Once it's finished, it'll throw you back to the list of snapshots. And it's just that simple to roll it all back. Next, we're going to take a look at the optimization tool. It's designed to generate reports based on a customizable set of rules intended to detect, you know, any inefficiencies in your policy store. The interface is very simple. All the user has to do is select an environment to evaluate and then click View Optimization Report. So I'm going to pick kind of an unoptimized environment here and then view the optimization report. The toolbox comes with a set of default rules that we, have built using our experience over the years of managing SSO environments and what we feel like is important to get right in your environments. So the rule sets include two types of rules, basic rules and advanced rules. So we're going to take a look at these basic rules first. They deal with the numeric values of specific object fields for specific object types. Boundaries are defined in the rules for these values, along with the recommended changes and explanations, which you see in the generated report. So here we have some anonymized data from a client who had some old default values still in place that needed to be updated and were picked up by the optimization engine. If the toolbox user disagrees with the value ranges or the suggested values, they can tailor the rules XML file to their own application's requirements. New object types and fields can even be added with your own value ranges and suggested values. So here we see a lot of ACO values that where the cache sizes were too low, and we give you a recommendation of what it should be and what that'll do for you. So next we'll take a look at some of the advanced results. This table that you see is a result of running our advanced rule set against this organization's policy store. The advanced rules look for three areas of improvement. One is, if there are any bad references in the policy store. As you can see, there's one found in this store. They have a realm that references an OID that doesn't exist. So they have, it's a corrupted object that needs to be fixed before it's moved into production. It'll also report when there are too many child objects within a parent object. In this case, they had too many realms in a domain, 240 to be exact, and the recommendation is 50. So they had quite a few realms in this one domain, which can definitely slow things down. And they had too many rules in a particular realm, so we recommend 25, and they had 51. Again, these values are customizable. The advanced rules are a little more rigid. It's the values that can be changed. You can't necessarily add new rules to the advanced rule set like you can with the basic. We also have some best practice conformance within the advanced rules. So here you can see one best practice in particular wasn't being followed by whoever created this policy store. They're using default agent and agent name in an ACO. We point out the particular ACO, and the recommendation is to use agents for multi-agent ACO configs. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at the clone tool. Clone tool's interface is also really simple. A user simply selects an environment to clone and then selects a target environment. Back to optimization, clone. So in this case, say we want to take our production environment and clone it to our QA environment. So we want to make sure that whatever is in production is going to be in QA, so all our tests are accurate and valid. The target environments policy store will be completely overwritten with the source environments policies. Nothing from the target's original policy store will remain once the cloning process is complete. Like I said, a common use case for this is you want a pristine QA environment that accurately mimics the production environment. Go ahead and hit clone. You can start with a fresh target or reuse an existing, more cluttered QA environment for the target. And just like the migration tool, the clone tool will take a snapshot of the target environment before any changes are made, so users can roll back to its original state if they need to. So we're getting close on time, so speed speed along a little bit. So, you know, with all this power to make changes to the SSO environments, you know, we need to give administrators a way to limit that power so that only trusted users are able to make changes to SSO environments or even the toolbox itself. So the toolbox uses role-based access control, which allows specific privileges or roles to be assigned to specific groups. And any users within these groups are granted the privilege level of the group. So groups also have control over specific toolbox assets, such as environments, migrations, snapshots. If a user's group doesn't have access to an environment, like production, for example, then they'll never see that environment as a choice in their migrations, and they won't be allowed to make any changes to that environment. The same goes for snapshots and saved migrations. So let's take a look at some of the roles a group can have by creating a new group with limited access and only a couple of assets. So here you have a list of all the current groups, and you know, it's pretty basic right now. We're going to create a new one and name that group staging. So you know, these users will only be able to create migrations but not actually run them. So, you know, going back to what Todd was talking about, you know, this is a way to create a group for a team, essentially, that's just creating, configuring migrations, but not actually running them. And then you can create kind of the sister group, which is, you know, a production group, which can only run these migrations, but not actually create or make changes to them. So I'm going to take away the execute permission and, you know, pretty much all other permissions. So really all they can do is create, update, and delete migrations. They can't actually make any changes to policy stores, including snapshot rollbacks. Oh, I'll let them go ahead and take snapshots. So create this group. So now we can see our group. We can go back and actually give it access to a couple of environments. You know, right now it has nothing, no environments, no migrations. So give it the dev and QA, and we'll just give it that migration that we just created. Update. Now you see what it has access to. Now let's go ahead and create a user to add to that group. Create a staging user, and then assign it to the group. Okay. Now let's log in as this user and see what they could do. So now when I go to migrate, I only have access to that one migration you saw earlier. When I try to create a migration, I only have access to a couple of environments. And even, I can make whatever configuration changes I want in the migration, add objects and all that. But I'll never be able to actually execute that migration. I can save it and share it, but I can't execute it. So now let's log out and log back in as the admin user to show the creation and management of environments. So that's also pretty simple UI. They just require the IP and the port of that the admin UI is running on, as well as an SSO administrator's credentials. To edit an environment, you just pick it from the drop-down, and to delete an environment, just select it from the drop-down and click delete. And you can create new environments from the screen as well. So that's all I have for the demo today, and feel free to put your questions into chat.
Great. You can make me presenter. Great. So just quickly, one last thing, just to give you a sense of the future. Some of the pieces that we're adding, things like templates, to let you create those repeatable processes, is to let actually create forms for business users to come in and request applications. Monitoring, which is not just availability, but also being notified when policies change and even lockdown changes in an environment. So if a policy creeps in that you don't want, it can be rolled back easily. Object duplication, things like improved comparison, and then being able to upgrade objects, so convert domains, for example, to an application. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the time.
Hey, Todd and Ben, thank you guys for that summary and the demonstration as well. There have been a couple of questions in the Q&A area, and I think they're visible to everybody. The one I think that is actually, I take it back, Chris. These are not visible to everybody. Is that right? Because we'll just repeat them for folks if that's the case.
They are visible to everyone.
They are visible. Okay, good deal. So everybody's seen those. There's one outstanding question right now, Todd, if you could take this. Once the policy is migrated via ToolBox, are there any test links available in ToolBox to quickly run a test to validate the migration? I think what they mean is not validate the migration is complete, because your demonstration showed the sort of the report back that the migration process happened. I think what they were looking at, trying to understand, is whether or not the impact of the migration is as expected, some sort of ability to sort of test that. And I'll let you sort of think and perhaps respond to that one.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. We don't have, for example, like a test tool capability to let you go in and validate what's been migrated. It is something that we could definitely consider, but currently there's not a tool or a button that you can click to say, you know, let me look at now that policy in production and make sure it's protecting everything it needs to protect.
Yeah, I think policy comparison, that feature that's in the pipeline, would certainly help with that. You know, once you run the migration, then you can fire up policy comparison, compare the policy from the target environment, the source environment and the target environment, and make sure they match exactly.
Yeah, nice. Okay, those are the questions that I saw. I think the other one that may be on people's minds is, as they look at ToolBox and they think about versions of CA SSO, Todd, if you can comment. I know that the significant obvious leverage of the REST APIs, which were introduced in 12.7, so I think the key question people will wonder is, hey, can I use ToolBox against 12.7 and 12.8? And any other commentary about its applicability?
Yeah, so 12.7 and 12.8 are the supported versions. Right now, currently, we don't support. We're leveraging the capabilities, the core capabilities deployed through those REST APIs. So those are the components that we're leveraging. Thanks.
One last question has come in. If you can take a look at that, I'm going to make some final comments from my side, and perhaps if you look at the question being asked, that you might be able to respond to that. But again, just sort of a little bit of an encapsulation of what you've seen in ToolBox, and I think there's some really powerful elements of what ToolBox adds to this question of how do I manage my policy environment. You saw the ability to migrate individual subsets of policies from dev to test. You saw the ability to clone a full policy store. The ability also, obviously, to take a snapshot and roll back to a previous state. I think all those three are highly valuable and powerful. And again, for the comment that was made, they're based on the REST interface. So this is sort of, the integration that we've achieved with CoreBlox here is through a very public interface, and that gives you comfort that it will continue to be valuable going forward. And then the other element, obviously, is the administrative delegation and scoping and delegation mechanisms that are available in the interface to give you greater control over who has these sets of powers, if you will, within a CA SSO environment. So thank the folks from CoreBlox very much for both describing the nature of the value here and also being able to show the demonstration live to you.
Thank you.
Any other elements that I see the response was provided to that last question, so I think we'll turn it over to you, Chris, and thank people for taking the time to be here.
Yes, thank you to all our presenters today. Thank you everyone for participating. Again, we'll have the recording and the presentation up on the community site within the next couple of days. And with that, I wish everybody a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot. Take care.